Let's bring in the former leader of the Conservative Party, Lord Hague, joining us now. Hello to you, my Lord. Thanks for joining us on the programme, talking about John Prescott, of course, both from Rotherham. You were very similar, but also very different.
Yeah, very different. John, a very tribal politician, of course, very loyal to the Labour Party, but a great personality. And he always used to say, well, Rotherham lads have got to stick together. And we did in many ways. We actually had a really good relationship off the camera, as it were, and often talked about Yorkshire. And in particular, Hull as well, and William Wilberforce. He was very proud that Wilberforce and the campaign to abolish the slave trade started in Hull. So we would discuss that as well. So there was a good-natured friend. He was the sort of politician you could really have a good laugh with and a friendly conversation with, even though you knew, of course, at the next question time, you'd be giving each other hell. But he was a great guy. I will miss him a lot, actually.
When you discussed politics together, were you equally blunt?
Yes, but of course you don't. If you're having a private discussion as politicians from different parties, you don't really go over the political arguments all the time. You do tend to find things that you have got in common. Or sometimes you're actually helping each other out. You know, there was one time at the Cenotaph on Remembrance Day, a very solemn occasion, when he was standing in for Tony Blair. But he hadn't done it before, and he wasn't exactly sure of the procedure. And he was asking me, well, you know, just remind me when we put down the wreath and when we march off and so on. So I did that. I helped him through all of that. And he said, as we marched off afterwards, fancy me having to rely on a Tory for instructions. But he was self-deprecating in that way. He was good-humored in that way. And behind the scenes, politicians do help each other out like that. And not every politician, of course, is reaches across the divide like he did. He was a very good-natured person, actually. And so you could have that sort of relationship with him.
And what about those that underestimated him at their peril?
Oh, this is very true. And I knew this from opposing him at question time, because I, of course, had hundreds of debates with Tony Blair at Prime Minister's Questions. And quite often I could get the better of Tony Blair, but I could never really get the better of John Prescott. Because he had such a great sense of humor, and he would give such direct answers that even though the perfectly constructed sentence was not his thing, really, but he really could give an answer, hit back, have lots of good jokes. You know, when I came back to deputise for David Cameron in Parliament, he would say, the Tories have got through so many leaders, they've gone back to the beginning again. And they've gone so green, they're recycling all their leaders. And this would really carry the House of Commons, and it was really difficult, actually, to get top side of him. In a different era, a different decade, he would have become the Prime Minister, actually, not just the Deputy Prime Minister.
Yeah. Adam Bolton was reminding us this morning that when people used to tease him about his sin tax, he used to say it was just another tax by the Tories.
No, he did, exactly. He played up to all of that. He didn't mind, and I once had a line at Prime Minister's Questions that there was so little English in his answer that President Chirac would have been happy with it, because that was the time the President of France was refusing to give speeches in English. But he laughed with all of that. He rolled along with all of that, and you know, didn't take himself, most of the time, didn't take himself too seriously, and that's always a big advantage in a politician.
As a fellow Rotherham boy, did you find any sniffiness about your accents when you were in the House of Commons? A very different era then to what it is now, of course.
Well, a little bit. I mean, I've still got traces of a Yorkshire accent in short vowels, but not, you know, that I went to Oxford and London and Paris, and, you know, my accent changed. He had more of an authentic northern accent. So he did get a bit of snobbery in a way. Yes, he did get teased. There would be shout, the famous shout of, but a really teasing, joking shout of Nicholas Soames of Mine's a Gin and Tonic, Giovanni, taunting him for having been a steward on a liner in his early days. But that again was really, that didn't bother him at all, because he had this great advantage to the Labour Party, that he was a reassuring presence. He was in the time of Tony Blair, he was the reassurance to the Labour Party that Tony Blair wouldn't become too much of a Tory, that as long as John Prescott was there, the Labour movement could think this was a reliable government, that it had that conscience and it had a proper northern voice there at the top of the government. So he didn't have to worry at all about being teased about things like that. That was one of his great strengths, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think we've ever seen a stronger double act as him and Tony Blair?
Well, there may be comparable, the Thatcher-Whitelaw combination was, in a sense, the same thing in reverse. Very, very different personalities, and a very powerful prime minister, but with a deputy who was a reassuring presence to many people outside the prime minister's immediate circle. So I think that was a very powerful combination. It was when that ended that Conservative government then went off the rails. And so, there is a bit of a parallel here, because that Blair-Prescott period was phenomenally successful, with the Labour Party winning 3 general elections and being in power for a very long time. Then when they weren't there, it didn't last very long. So I think those perhaps are 2 comparisons, but he was, like Whitelaw, John Prescott was a great personality, and none of us who dealt with him or knew him or debated with him will ever forget him.
Now, before I let you go, my lord, I must give you the opportunity to say something about the Oxford Union. I did have Lord Mandelson on in this hour, and he did say something, so do feel free.
You mean about the election of a Chancellor of Oxford?
Of course.
Yes. Well, the voting is taking place this week, and people and will be announced, I think, in the middle of next week. So people must vote for whoever they think is the best candidate, and remember that it is not a political appointment. It is whoever they think over the next decade can explain to the world what Oxford is and how critical it is to the future of the country. So I'm available to do that, but people must vote for whoever they think is the best candidate.
It's great to see you. Thank you for taking the time, and thanks for sharing some stories with us. Much appreciated.
Thank you.